Okay, so for assignment 18, you will download a zip file and unzip it and import it into Eclipse, much like you did for assignment 16. And so once you get that assignment 18 into Eclipse, this is the code that you're going to have. And I'd just like to walk you through some of that code real quick. There are two .java files. One is photo viewer, that's the top level file, and the other one is a photo panel. If you just hit play right off the bat, or you compile and run the program, it should open up a file dialog where you're asked to select a file, and there will be a resources folder. It should start right in that resources folder, and there'll be some images that are a part of that zip file. If you have other images you would like to use, you can go ahead and find them on your computer, and they'll work just fine. But if you select a file, it should then open up essentially a picture viewer and view that picture. You've got a change image button. If you select that, that just allows you to select a different image. And then there's a select a transform drop-down menu, or select dialog, or select box. And if you select one of these options, well, at this point nothing happens. It'll be up to you to modify this drop-down so that when you select an option, it then performs that particular action on the image. And in a video that you should have before that you watch this one, I'll show each one of those actions happening. As you move your mouse over the image, you can see this up here changing. The X and Y values are the location in the image where your pointer is at. And the R, G, and B are the red, green, and blue components of the pixel that your mouse is over. So right here you have something that's blue. You'll see that the blue value is higher than the red and green. And over here this looks kind of reddish. The red value is higher than the green and blue. The rest of it's gray, and they should be approximately equal for this image. So what do you need to do? Let me first walk through the existing code just to kind of explain it, and then show you the functions that you have to write. And I will write one and give you a hint on another one. So in the photo viewer, the instance variables, you've got a photo panel, photo. That's the other code that I wrote. So we've created an object called a photo panel, which is what actually displays the image on the screen. You got a button for selecting a file. That's where you hit the button and then you can change your image. You got a combo box, and we call that transform. That's your select box where you can select some sort of transform that you're going to perform on the image to transform the image in some way. And then a label, pixel color. This is the label that shows the red, green, and blue values of the pixel that is under the cursor. So then this constructor for photo viewer, okay, so it's a constructor for photo viewer. The name of the class is photo viewer. The function says public photo viewer. So this is the constructor. It creates the object, and it's just going to lay out all the individual components of the user interface. So you set the layout manager to null. You create a new button that says change image, and you assign it to the select file. You set its bounds, that's its position and location. And you add action listener this. That way, this sets the object that will control the actions or will respond to actions on that button. And so the photo viewer extends JFrame because we want it to be visible in a frame, and it implements action listener because we want it to be able to listen for the actions on the button. And then we say this .add select file. So this is what puts the select file button onto the JFrame so that it's visible on the JFrame. Until you add it, it's not visible. We create an array of strings that we call selections. This is the text that's going to show up in the combo box. And so the first option is select a transform. One is invert colors, swap colors, darken, lighten, make gray, rotate clockwise, and flip horizontal. These are the different transforms that we can perform, and this just creates all the text for the drop-down, or the combo box. We create a new instance of a combo box, and we pass it that array of strings so that it knows what text to put on itself. We assign the result to our transform variable. We set its bounds. We add the action listener, so this photo panel, or I'm sorry, photo viewer is going to listen to actions for both the button and the combo box. And then we add the combo box to the J panel so that it's visible on our screen. We create a new label, we set its bounds, and I'm setting the font to monospace and plain with the text height of 12. And what this does is it makes sure that every character takes the same amount of space. That if you take this out, it should still work, but it looks a little bit better if we use a monospace font for the way that I'm using the label. The way that the label's changing its text. And then we add the label to our J panel, to our photo viewer, to make the label visible. Now, in the very beginning, that label doesn't have any text. We'll worry about that a little bit later. We're going to listen to mouse motion events. So, and whenever the mouse moves, we'll update the label. We create a new photo panel with a size of 600. We select an image. This is a method that I've called. That's what opens the file dialog box and selects an image. We set the bounds of the photo panel, and we add the photo panel to our photo viewer so that it's visible on the screen. And then we add a mouse motion listener. This is what allows us to respond to mouse movement in our application. So let's look at select image. So we called select image when the thing was constructed. It creates a file chooser, and this string here tells it which folder to start in. It says, the / says in the same folder as our project, and then resources, there's a resources folder that I've created in the project, and I've put all my images there. So it's going to start in the resources folder where all the images are at. And then we say set file filter and file name extension filter. This is what limits our file dialog box to look at only certain file types. The JPG is for JPEG, GIF, PNG, and BMP. Those are all file extensions for image files. And if someone were to select a file that's not an image, that would cause our program problems. So this filters out, so they only have the option to select images. And this is just a label that they can see on their screen that tells them that they're opening images. And then fd.show open dialog. This is what makes the file dialog box visible on the screen. So that this displays the dialog box. They're going to pick their file, and after they've picked it, execution comes back and it starts up and it says photo load image. So it tells the photo panel to load the image, fd get selected file, the image file that they selected. Okay? Main is a lot like the other JFrames that we did, where inside of main we create an instance of the class. We set the default close operation, we set the size, we set resizable to false, and visible to true. This makes the window visible on the screen, the whole application visible. Now when we implement mouse motion listener, that allows us to add mouse motion listener this in the constructor. But when we add implement mouse motion listener, that forces us to also implement certain methods. the two methods that we have to implement are mouse dragged and mouse moved. We're not going to do anything with mouse dragged. We're just going to leave this as a stub so that when the mouse is dragged, nothing really happens. But when the mouse is moved, we're going to get a pixel from our photo panel. And it'll be the pixel that the mouse happens to be over. We're going to get the X and Y value. Now this X and Y value isn't relative to the upper left-hand corner of our panel, or of our J-frame. It's the upper left-hand corner of the panel. So let me run this again and show you what I mean. So notice that there's a 0, 0 in the upper left-hand corner of the J-frame. There would also be a 0, 0 in the upper left-hand corner of the panel. And it's the one in the panel that we're really worried about, because that's where how we locate our pixels. What row or column of pixels we're at is measured from the upper left-hand corner of our panel. So we have to get the mouse X and Y relative to the panel, which is our photo panel. And then this tricky little bit of code here, I'll explain it in a little more detail later. But this pixel color is stored in an int, that's 32 bits, and it has red, green, and blue components. And this tricky little bit of code extracts the red, green, and blue values out of that one integer. And then we set the label. Now this format string is a little tricky too, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail. But this essentially just sets and formats the label. And then we repaint so that the changes are visible on the screen. And so this bit of code is what makes that label update when we move our mouse around. The action performed. So this is the method that gets called whenever anything happens on our buttons. Remember in the constructor, we said add action listener. The reason why we can add action listener is because we've implemented add action listener. But when we implement the add action listener interface, that forces us to implement an action performed method. And so this method gets called whenever an action is performed on one of those things that our applet is listening for the actions of. And so it's listening for actions of two things: the select file button and the transform, which is holding the J panel, or I'm sorry, the J combo box. So we're listening to actions from the button and the combo box. This if statement, if e.getSource, so when this method is called, it receives an action event. We can get the source of the action event and determine if that source is the button or the J combo box. If it's the button, we're just going to call that select image method again and open up the file dialog box, let them choose a new one. If it's the transform, the J combo box, we want to figure out what they've selected in the combo box. And this is going to evaluate to an integer. If that integer is 1, it means they selected the first item in the combo box, which is invert colors. And we'll just tell the photo panel to invert the colors. If it's a 2, they've selected swap. If it's a 3, they've selected darken. If it's a 4, they've selected lighten. If it's a 5, they've selected make gray. If it's a 6, they've selected rotate clockwise. If it's a 7, they've selected flip horizontal. And so our photo panel has each of these methods. These are the methods that you will implement. I'll go through the code for the photo panel in the next video, and I'll show you how to implement at least one completely, and I'll give you a hint as a second one of these methods that will be your assignment. Thank you. This is